You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on iTunes and at facebook.com/DCAU Review. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, it is episode 8 of the DCAU Review. I am your host, Cal Renner. Along with me today, as always, my brother, good friend, and co-host, Liam. Welcome to episode 8 of the DCAU Review.
I'm excited to be here. We've got a very special attraction today. Our first non-Batman the Animated Series regular episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. Episode. It's closely tied into it, though. We talked about doing this, just kind of breaking up the monotony of just talking about different animated episodes. And we'll start to get some variety in here in the next couple episodes forthcoming. So we decided to celebrate our making it to 8 episodes by talking about Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which of course is the first full-length animated Batman feature film to debut. And it came in about the second year of the Batman animated series. It was based loosely off of some of the characters from the Batman Year 2 comic book that came out 5 or 6 years before that. And really, it's an interesting film to sit down and watch because you take what we're used to, your 22 minutes of Batman animated storyline, plot, music, and voice acting, and you stretch it out. This movie is, what do we say, 76 minutes?
76 minutes.
So you got over an hour's worth of Batman animated series. So they do a pretty good job of making it feel not like a extended episode of Batman the animated series, but an actual feature-length film.
Yeah, absolutely. From the moment the movie starts, the atmosphere is bigger, the score is bigger. It's still the Batman theme that we know, but it's sung by a choir.
Yeah.
And there's a really good atmosphere that they establish really early on. The lighting is done very well. We've talked about that on some of the past episodes. That sort of the lighting, the shadow work is a little inconsistent at times on the animated show, but this was a feature-length film, and so they had their time. They had a larger budget, although I think you can look this up. It's they didn't have as big a budget as perhaps you would think for a Warner Brothers animated theatrical movie. They were sort of told at the last minute. I guess this was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video feature that was then sort of at the last minute decided it was going to be released in theaters. So they were
they had to kind of hurry up and change a few things.
Yeah, they had to scramble. So, but all things considered, the whole overall atmosphere, it is, as you mentioned, it doesn't just feel like a long episode of the show. Feels like Batman is a different person by the end of this movie. The main characters of Batman and Alfred, to a lesser extent, are absolutely changed by the events of this movie, and we get more insight. We talked about that in Nothing to Fear and a few other episodes of really deep dive into who Batman is, why he feels he needs to do what he does, and sort of the tragedy of that character.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does a good job. Obviously, with a longer runtime than your typical episode, it does a good job of really going into and exploring Batman's psyche, who he is, why he does what he does, and even the internal battle that's faced between, can this guy ever be happy? Is he? It's established very early on in this movie that he has made this vow to his parents, and he feels like it's not just, a promise that he made to him. He calls it a vow, which when you think of that is, a legally binding agreement almost. Like you think of marriage as it's wedding vows. It's something that you're getting up in front of your friends and family and making this promise for forever. So he's making this vow to his parents that he's going to avenge them. And, he struggles with this throughout the movie. It's this psychological issue. Can he be happy giving up the Batman mantle? Is he allowed to do that? Would his parents want him to do that, or would they want him to spend his life avenging their death? So it's a really cool exploration of that.
Yeah, it's a balance between he's trying to honor, as you mentioned, this vow he made. He's keeping his word. And at the same time looking at it as I can't do this. He actually says this almost word for word. He's like, I can't be Batman if there's someone waiting for me to come home.
Yeah. Which is
that's deep, and that's really, the idea that he doesn't, to an extent, doesn't feel like he has the tools or the temperament to ever be truly happy. So his place is to do what he does so that everybody else can be happy. So the rest of the good citizens of Gotham can live normal lives. He will take on this burden so that everyone else doesn't have to.
Absolutely.
And so to see that sort of him fighting with it, and see him fall in love, and start to kind of question that, and then a very human emotion of wondering, is his own happiness, is his own love, is that more important than this vow he made, this promise he made? Is it worth breaking his word in order to have this one last chance at happiness for himself?
It's super deep stuff, and we've said this over and over again that this is more than just your regular children's cartoon. We were talking before we started today's episode that you had gone back and watched. Siskel and Ebert actually gave this 2 thumbs up, but they actually had missed it in the original theatrical run, came back and did it when one of the other live-action movies came out. But you mentioned how they mentioned that this was something that kind of proved to them that animation isn't just for kids.
Yeah, and that might seem a little strange in hearing that with 2018 years, because sure. The Pixar movies have come out, and there's animation is a beautiful tool, and that's what it is. It's a storytelling device, and the basic idea that if it's animated it must be for children, of course, is silly.
Right.
It's a storytelling device. You can tell your story as adult or as child friendly as you want to. And it doesn't. If something is child friendly, that doesn't mean it's not a good story, or it isn't a deep story, or you can't ask thought provoking questions. So this is just a really great job of like I said, setting up the atmosphere, telling a story that means something and that changes who our main character is by the end of it.
Absolutely. Now, since this is a feature-length film and it's a little bit longer than normal, our episode might be a little bit longer today just because we have a little bit more to talk about, but we'll try and keep it to our normal time length out of respect for our listeners. But so let's go ahead and jump right into the plot, Liam. We're going to break down, just as we always do with the episodes that we watch from week to week. We're breaking it down, judging it based on our 4 main categories, which are...
They are plot, voice acting, animation, and music. And of course we also have the bonus category, where if something that's not covered in those 4 main ones, or if something we just really need to give a little extra props to something, we can throw an extra point or 2.
That's right.
So starting off with plot, I had plot at 7 out of 10.
Okay.
The story is by Alan Burnett, who... He's you probably know his name. If you're listening to this podcast, you know who that is.
Right.
But his name doesn't get mentioned, I think, as much as it should.
Sure.
When we're talking about the names that mean the most to the DC animated universe.
Yep.
The work that he did on Batman
You
Beyond.
hear a lot of Dini, you hear a lot of Tim, you hear maybe some Radomski.
Yeah.
And a lot of Burnett.
Yeah, and he didn't... Burnett really never had his breakout show like the way a guy like Glenn Murakami had Teen Titans, so he sort of broke out. He was a storyboard artist and a producer on Batman Beyond, then he got his own show and made his own thing, where Burnett maybe didn't necessarily ever have that moment, or James Tucker when he did Batman the Brave and the Bold. That's a very unique. So Burnett didn't necessarily have that moment of where it was clearly his brainchild, his baby alone,
right?
And so I think maybe his name just doesn't get mentioned as much as it should. But he has credits going back all the way to the Super Friends show.
Wow!
And obviously he the story is credited to him here. I think the screenplay also has Paul Dini and a few other names attached to it. So I'm sure it was by committee, but just want to mention, Alan Burnett does a great job. He mentioned he wanted to tell a romance story because that really wasn't something that had ever been covered in the Batman episodes they'd done to that point. And really, aside from some flirting with Catwoman, and I guess we get a little bit of the Talia stuff later on in the Ra's al Ghul episodes, there's not really a ton where we ever delve into the idea of Batman. He has maybe trysts or flirtatious moments, but
Sure.
certainly in World's Finest, he sort of has a relationship with Lois Lane.
Yeah.
Funny enough, considering who voiced the Phantasm in this episode, but
Yeah.
But this is really the deepest dive we get into Bruce Wayne's romantic life, and
Yeah.
it's sort of offset by the first scene where we see Bruce as him sort of being surrounded by airhead rich girls who are all sort of throwing themselves at him, and he's sort of rolling his eyes and not interested.
Right.
Is the sort of the vapid elite of Gotham, the heiresses and other rich girls of Gotham who haven't really ever caught his eye, or that he somewhat uses in not no uncertain terms.
Right.
He uses them to sort of keep up his playboy image,
Sure.
and for nothing else. So seeing that sort of contrasted with this deep love that he had for this woman Andrea is really strong. So yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to Burnett. This is basically his brainchild,
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, there's definitely some influence from the Batman Year 2 book, and I'm sure other places as well. But just a really fun plot.
He also, we were reading up on it, and he made sure that while they included the Joker in this story, and Joker plays a super pivotal role in it, Joker wasn't the main person that they wanted to focus on about this. He wanted a story that revolved around a character that wasn't a part of the typical Batman rogues gallery.
Yeah.
So he's able to, and I think he does so very effectively in this movie, he's able to bring in the Joker, but the Joker isn't distracting. The Joker plays a supporting role, and he does it well. He doesn't overtake the movie at any point, and he's used very well in a way that's effective, that doesn't distract from the main plot of the movie.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's not a lot of times when Mark Hamill's Joker isn't going to steal the show.
Sure.
And not that he isn't. He's great. He's great in this, and we'll get into that when we talk about voice acting. But he is a part. He was sort of the muscle for one of the old mobsters. Mm-hmm. So he is sort of he is connected, and potentially it's not actually shown, but it appears he may have pulled the trigger on. He might have been the man who actually physically killed Andrea's father.
Right.
So he does have a pivotal part to play, but yeah, he's introduced probably 45 minutes into the piece. He's not. This is very much Batman and Andrea's story. It's not. He's an important part of it, and he becomes sort of the villain at the end for Batman to vanquish.
Sure.
But that's an absolutely great point. Is that this is very much focused. It does not lose focus, and for an animated feature, as you mentioned, to really stay focused and not feel like just a couple episodes of the show loosely, so sewn together, to keep that coherent and keep that focus. Really, really excellent job. So yeah, I went ahead and gave it a 7 out of 10 just because I thought there's a little bit of meandering. There's the character of Arthur Reeves, who's sort of this slimy congressman who was Andrea's father's accountant, and sort of eventually it turns out that he sort of sold out the Beaumonts to the mob in order to fund his original political campaign, and he gets a lot of screen time, and I feel like maybe that screen time could have been better used. Maybe
he's not fleshed out very well for the amount of time that he gets.
Yes,
you don't know very much about him until the final, 15 minutes of the movie. You kind of figure out that he is as slimy as you thought he was. He's that slimy.
Yeah, so for that reason, like I said, I went 7 out of 10. It's still very strong. Still really enjoyable story. The flashback sequences are absolutely great. They're beautifully written.
Yeah.
It really makes you feel like you fall in love with this girl the way Bruce does. Like, it shows you this isn't right. Like, I keep coming back to, like, it's not a fling, it's not a flirtation like it, like a lot of times it's portrayed with Catwoman and him in the comics. Like he loves this girl, and it absolutely tears him apart to the point where that was his last chance at happiness. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Alfred is very often sort of pushing Bruce to not be Batman. I think if you've seen the Christopher Nolan Batman films, that's a pretty recurring theme.
He wants the very best for Bruce, and he knows that isn't a life as Batman.
Correct. And so there's a lot of scenes from when it's first revealed that Andrea is back in town, and Alfred's, hey, are you gonna go see her? And Batman kind of gets angry at him, and that again shows in the flashbacks when he's encouraging Bruce to pursue this relationship with this girl, and it's telling him, you're not going crazy. It's the opposite. Like, this is the breath of fresh air that Alfred's been waiting for.
Right.
And then when the engagement is broken off, the very next scene is Bruce putting on the bat cowl for the first time.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into animation and sure, and voice acting as well. But again, just this story of a guy. This was Bruce's last chance to be happy, and again, you talk about a heavy subject matter for a children's cartoon.
Yeah.
But so 7 out of 10 was my score. What did you give it?
I gave it 8 out of 10. Again, for all those reasons that you just mentioned, I think that the story, it could have been, I think, a 10 out of 10, but I think it runs into some issues where you have a lot of characters, you have a lot of moving parts, you have 5 or 6 different mobsters, you have Andrea, you have her father, you have Alfred, you have Bruce, you have the Joker added in, then you have the subplot with the police going after Batman, and so you have Bullock and Gordon, and the bumbling idiot SWAT team makes an appearance again.
Plus, and we talked about this a little off air, the sort of the overarching theme of vengeance as a whole.
Right. So that you have all of that stuff converging, and you could look at it two ways. Which is what I ended up doing. I look at it for the amount of things that they had in the movie itself, the overarching theme of this, vengeance. Is it Bruce is fighting for vengeance, and he keeps coming back at Andrea with, hey, vengeance isn't something you should chase, and she keeps throwing it in his face, well, Bruce, you're Batman, and that's what you do. Like,
right.
You're saying that I shouldn't seek that, but that's what you do, so you're pretty much a hypocrite here. So being able to flesh that out and seeing that Bruce, kind of flesh out Bruce's character, we talked about that, him having this desire to like, this is his burden to carry, and he doesn't want anybody else to carry it. And not because he thinks he's the only one that can, but because he doesn't want other people having to carry this. You see that time and time again. They explore that a little bit in the Robin's Reckoning episode, and it's been explored in the comics time and time again in relationships that he has with his different Robins, and
even going to Batman Beyond, where he's very reluctant to let Terry put on that
absolutely.
suit.
Because he doesn't want. He knows the life that he has to carry. He knows the burden that it is, and especially with Andrea's choice to kill, she's not just seeking vengeance and justice. She thinks that vengeance and justice is done through murder. Mm-hmm. So you add an extra layer to that, to what he knows or thinks that Andrea's going to have to carry once you kill people. Man, it's just it's a lot of stuff. They do really well. I think you mentioned the Alfred and Batman dynamic, being able to there's 3 different parts of it. You have the flashbacks where Alfred's very much happy for Bruce. He wants him to pursue this, and through it, he even in the modern day when Andrea comes back into town, like you said, he wants him to seek this relationship out. He wants him to seek happiness. Batman, kind of pushes him away. Well, he does the "you don't know me very well," or "you don't know me at all," or "you think you know me, don't you? You don't know me at all." It's kind of like a "well, you're not my real dad" type of comeback to him. And then for Alfred at the very end, Bruce is down because he thinks he failed Andrea. He thinks that after all this, that it was his responsibility still to save her from herself. And Alfred gets down there at his level, because Bruce has got his head in his hands. Alfred gets down on his knees, and he's just like, you can't save everybody. Like, you can try, but there's going to be people that you're not going to be able to save.
I couldn't save her, Alfred.
I don't think she wanted to be saved, sir. Vengeance blackens the soul, Bruce. I always feared you would become that which you fought against. You walk the edge of that abyss every night. But you haven't fallen in, and I thank heaven for that. But Andrea fell into that pit years ago. And no one, not even you, could have pulled her back.
He does a good job of explaining the difference between the Phantasm and Batman.
Absolutely.
He mentions that vengeance, there's an abyss that comes with seeking revenge and anger and hatred and murder, and Bruce walks the line but doesn't fall in, or at least he hasn't yet.
Right.
But he mentions Andrea fell into that abyss years ago.
Absolutely.
There was no coming back for her.
Yep. And it's great because even at that point, like, Alfred has come to the acceptance of, you know what, Bruce has decided that happiness, peace is something that he's never going to face, so I'm going to encourage him in the life that he's chosen to lead. So that's super cool. I think overall the plot itself, despite having all those moving parts, it resolves pretty interestingly. I think the only thing that we talked about before we started recording that is kind of left unresolved and is Batman going to have to take down Andrea at the end of this? Yeah. Is he going to have to fight her? Is he going to have to, what is he going to do? Is she going to make him face the choice of fighting her or, letting her kill the Joker? And that's kind of taken out of his hands because she just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
So that resolution leaves you a little less satisfied, especially knowing that they don't bring her back on the show at any point except for a cameo at the end of Justice League Unlimited. But she's just kind of done, and it kind of leaves that, well, man, you don't know whether or not he was going to have to, what would the choice he was going to make. So for all those reasons, for the reasons that you mentioned, 8 out of 10. It's very great. It's a great movie. It's easily, of the Batman animated movies that have been made, it sets the bar pretty high.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know that there'll be one that surpasses this. I haven't seen Sub-Zero in a very long time, but I remember when I watched that, I still thought Phantasm was much better. So there's a reason why people hold this to a
absolutely.
And
there's different types, like Return of the Joker.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy that.
Return of the Joker is great.
But that's a completely different style of movie. They're telling a different story.
Yep.
They're telling a different. It's a different design. Everything is very different about that. And it was sort of one of the first big connections they made between the old series and Batman Beyond, which had mostly been left to stand on its own. But for the story they're telling as a standalone Batman story, it does not get much better in animation than this one.
Agreed. I think you mentioned also the plot hole of why the Joker just happened to pick the World's Fair of all places. It's very convenient that it works out because it's where Bruce and Andrea fall in love originally.
Yes.
So it's an interesting choice for, of all places, the Joker just happens to luck out and pick that place. But it's great. It's a great movie.
Yeah, and there's a lot
plot is good.
Yeah, there's a lot of little touches like the Joker. There's a scene where the Joker and Andrea are fighting and he reaches behind him to grab. You think he's going to grab this machete knife, but next to him is a salami, and he's sort of reaching behind him, and they show the hand going towards the knife. But then when he brings it up, he's grabbed the salami and chooses to hit her in the head with the salami, which is such a great Joker thing because it's still a blunt object, and he still then goes and beats her down. Yeah, and they sort of have a fist fight. They did not hold back on the violence in this episode. No, physical violence.
You could tell that they had the freedom to show punching. They showed blood. The Joker loses a tooth in a scene that we'll talk about a little bit in the animation. But they did not hold back. They had the freedom because it was a direct-to-video movie, or direct-to-video movie initially, and then shown in the theaters. They didn't have the standards that they had to follow, and it kind of showed you what some of that fun could have been had they not had to follow those standards of the cartoon. Joker would be doing a lot less tripping and falling.
I was like, his enemy was not gravity in this one. His enemy was Batman's fists.
Sort of. He does face gravity when Batman pulls him down on his jetpack.
Yeah, so. That might be the other thing that brings the plot down a little bit for me is we're having this gritty crime drama of revenge and love and this vengeance and all this stuff, and then in the middle of it, the Joker puts on a jetpack and tries to fly away.
Yeah.
And Batman swings up and grabs him, and then they fall down. And then we're right back to the gritty, angry, love, heartbreak, vengeance story. But
sure.
So there's a few little bits, but obviously this is all nitpicky stuff where we don't want to just have it be a total praise fest.
Absolutely.
So, but absolutely, plot's excellent.
All right, moving on. So next topic we'll talk about is some voice acting, and I don't think we need to linger on this very much, just because it's super consistent. It's everything you dreamed it would be of having in 45 minutes of Mark Hamill Joker. Kevin Conroy really does a great job of balancing his Bruce Wayne. It's more of a Bruce. The flashbacks are all almost exclusively Bruce Wayne, so it gives shines a lot of spotlight. It shines a huge spotlight on the Bruce Wayne character, allows him to do some good voice acting in that role, but it also flips back to some Batman. The non-current points are a lot of heavy, or the present day. That's what I'm trying to say. The present day focuses a lot on Batman, so it allows him to be Batman. So it's interesting. I gave voice acting, because it's so consistent, it's so great, 9 out of 10. The one thing I will mention, the Phantasm's voice, the choice to make it, they actually made it Carl Beaumont's voice, which is
Stacy Keach, who's a pretty well-known character actor. He's been on Prison Break, was on a sitcom that I loved called Titus.
Okay.
Been in a million things, done a lot of voice acting as well. And
you'll recognize his face if you Google him.
Yes.
But he's great as Carl Beaumont, and then the fact that they made him the voice of the Phantasm.
Batman, how'd you get here?
Your angel of death awaits.
Gives you that misdirection that makes you think, could it be? Yes, it probably is. Whatever. It's an homage from Andrea Beaumont to her father, or whatever.
Yes.
But, yeah. So I gave voice acting 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I also went 9 out of 10. Really strong performances all around. You've already mentioned how good Kevin Conroy was. He had a lot to play with here.
The one line he gives where he says to Andrea, what will vengeance bring?
What will vengeance solve?
Well, what will vengeance solve? Yeah, it's so good. He delivers it so well.
Yeah, and Dana Delaney, by the way, is voicing Andrea
AKA
here.
Lois Lane.
Yeah, she's a legend. She's a DCAU legend here in her first DCAU appearance. So that's a little jarring.
It is, because it sounds like
Lois.
Yeah.
You mentioned you kept waiting for her to say Smallville.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is if you're a fan of this, if you're listening to this podcast, Dana Delaney is Lois Lane to you.
Right.
And so having her play not that character is a little jarring, but she's excellent. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. # my Alfred.
The Alfred.
Now more so than ever.
Yes.
In this movie, really, really great work by him. As you mentioned, that final scene where it's very much the dad of the sitcom sitting down his kid, puts his hands on his shoulders and just tells him, "Hey man, you did your best. And sometimes that's not good enough. And we just got to move on, and we keep fighting."
Right.
And it's such great. It's so great. And so I also, like I said, I also went 9 out of 10 for voice acting. Mark Hamill, one of the final shots is the explosions all go around, and Joker just sort of looks around at the explosions, and Andrea has him by the lapels, and he lets loose the Joker laugh to end all Joker laughs. And it's punctuated by he's missing a tooth.
Yep.
So and we'll get into that a little bit more in animation, but it's all-time great performance by Mark Hamill here. I mean, it's always great, but he brought his A+ game for this one.
I agree. Yeah, he's fantastic. didn't miss a beat for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like we said, he has limited time, but it's not that he steals the show in a distracting way, but he's great.
Oh, absolutely.
He does his job well.
And this he does a great job in this episode of sort of doing that hard line that we've mentioned in past episodes of the Joker is funny, but
Right.
he's also a monster, an absolute demon.
Absolutely.
Like that can be a hard line to watch because you have this sort of, you can have like the Cesar Romero side where he's very silly and he's very over the top, or you can sort of have the Jared Leto where he's really weird and is, plays with knives and stuff and is a little weird.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's a whole other thing. But but this walks that line between I heard Paul Dini say it once on one of the DVDs, the clown and the killer.
Yeah.
He's a monster, he's an absolute psychopath, but he has some legitimately funny lines in here. Mark, breaking news everybody, Mark Hamill's great as the Joker, but it bears extra mention on this one.
I would agree. Perfect. All right, so let's move on to animation. So animation for this episode, what'd you give it?
I went ahead and gave it an 8 out of 10.
I said episode, but it's a movie.
I've said that like 4 times. I'm pretty sure. I went ahead and gave it an 8 out of 10 for this one. It's really strong. There's a couple of really great sequences right at the start, where Batman's sort of first revealed, and it's time for Cape Movement Corner, folks, because there's a lot of it in this movie.
So much Cape
movement.
And you know what the cool thing is? Because Phantasm had a cape, you had double the Cape Movement.
Hashtag double Cape Movement. DCM.
So much Cape
Movement. But it's so fluidly animated, and the reason I bring that up, I keep talking about it, it's like, because that's such a part of Batman.
We know why you love it.
Yeah, but I still want to talk about it. It's such a part of who Batman is, and part of why his design is so cool. And so when it's animated as beautifully and as fluidly as it is, I'm just going to keep mentioning it because it's great.
So was there some specific Cape movement that you loved, or a specific scene that was good?
There's the scene where it's raining out, and Batman is spying on Andrea and Arthur's dinner, and it's animated. It's animated really. So he's holding up binoculars. There's lightning striking, so the colors keep changing, and the cape's just flowing behind him, and then it comes into like a sort of a painted moment. It's very Fleischer Superman-esque, where it's it's the painted motion of his hands moving, but you still have the animated cape sort of in the background there. It's great. It's like a comic. It's a comic panel come to life. I can't pay it a higher compliment than that.
There you go. All right, lots of cape movement. So you gave it 8 out of 10?
Absolutely. What did you give it?
I also gave it 8 out of 10. I think there are some inconsistencies, and we talked about this as we were watching it. There looks like there was 2 different storyboard artists, which once we did some research on the movie, when they found out that it was going to the theaters as opposed to just direct to video, they had to kind of adjust some things and do some different storyboarding. So they may have used, and you can actually see this throughout the Batman animated series episodes, that they used a couple different storyboard artists, and based on that artist, Batman kind of has a different look. There's one artist who draws him very similar to what we're used to, all of the like file art of Batman. Anything that you go to, just type in like Batman file art, there's like a shot of Batman on top of Two-Face's car, or Batman swinging and the Penguin with a umbrella underneath of it. Any of that classic card art that you see for Batman the Animated Series, there's an artist, one of their artists, storyboard artists, animates it that way. He draws Batman that way, and it's animated that way. And then there's another guy who draws it a little bit more realistic. Batman's nose of his cowl is a little bit more pointy. It's hard. He in the Batman costume looks a little more, I guess, realistic, if you were going to say between the two, but it's just more comfortable to see him kind of with that square jaw in the costume, similar to how you would see Bruce Timm, closer to how Bruce Timm draws him. So there's a lot of back and forth between those two storyboard artists in this movie. There's different parts where different artists were used, so there's a little bit of inconsistency, and we talked about this before we went on, just about holding this, because it is a 76 minutes of Batman. It's a full-length feature. It had a bigger budget, albeit not much bigger, but a bigger budget than a regular episode does. We hold a 22-minute episode up to all of these things. We have to hold almost to a higher standard, but definitely the same standard. So because there's inconsistency in that, I gave it 8 out of 10. There's still a lot of great things. I think you mentioned the rain scene with the cape movement in that. To me, we haven't covered an episode. There's an episode with the Two-Face two-parter. There's rain and lightning, and there's a couple other episodes that involve rain, water, and lightning. But this episode, this movie, kind of showcases that for the first time. I'm sure that's not something easy to do. The lightning striking, that whole scene is great. Lots of nods to Max Fleischer.
Yeah.
Superman in this, from the character design of Andrea Beaumont to a couple other scenes, like you said, that the motion painting, kind of animating the painted backgrounds a little bit. Choice to animate the background in the one bat plane scene as opposed to the plane itself is animated and the background was stagnant. It's the opposite. So some good stuff there. They don't know how to animate that stupid SWAT team. I don't know if that, to me, that was the weakest point. I don't know if that scene was added towards the end or what the deal was. It was rushed, but there's not as much detail in it. The SWAT team looks super goofy. They act goofy. They're dumb. If I never see that SWAT team again, I'll be happy. But you mentioned it a little bit before about the debut of the Batman costume. So
yes,
that scene is animated incredibly simply. Simply.
Yes,
but it is. There's not a lot going on. It's Alfred and Batman. Batman is completely in the dark the entire time. You don't see Batman. You don't see any blue. It's black and gray the entire time. He puts on the mask. You see Alfred's reaction to it, and that's it. We watched that scene twice or three times because it was so good.
Yeah,
and they don't do a lot. It's not a ton being done. They didn't have to go over the top. They didn't show the Batman costume at all. They just show him putting it on. They do a close-up of his eyes, and he squints a little bit, so his eye shape change. Oh, it's just so good.
It's great. It sort of briefly mirrors the opening to the Batman the Animated Series cartoon, where it's the close-up of his eyes sort of scrunched down, and then it flashes to Alfred looking absolutely horrified at what he's seeing.
He even says, "My God."
Yes, and again, what we were talking about before, and why this added so much to that subplot of Alfred so desperately didn't want Bruce to go down this path. He wanted to see him be happy and raise a family and be a normal guy and find happiness. But in this moment where he's had his heart broken, he knows now that the only thing he has left is to go back to this vow that he made. So that scene, the scene of him putting on the suit, also for continuity's sake, it is the suit that he wears in the flashback sequence from Robin's Reckoning, where he's got the pocket belt. And it's that
suit 1.0.
Yes, so we don't get to see a lot of that suit in the animated series, but it was a nice little bit. It's not the same suit that he wears in the regular show, so I thought that was a nice little detail they didn't have to add, but they chose to, which I appreciated. And only other scene that stands out for me animation wise is when he goes to his parents' grave in the rain, and the rain's hitting him, and his hair is wet and sort of falling down into his face, and he's crying, and he's telling them how sorry he is, and it'll be a shot of Bruce's very expressive face, and then it'll flash to the grave, and you'll just see lightning strike. So it's the idea of him basically pleading with his parents. I mean, he literally says, "I need it to be okay. I need it," and we'll talk. We talked about that in voice acting already. I need it to be different now. I didn't count on being happy. But the only response he's getting seems like anger. Right. It seems like his parents are sending lightning to him to tell him that he's failing them, or he's going back on his word. And so that scene.
And the beautiful, to me, the thing that stood out in that scene is that Andrea walks up, like you mentioned, Bruce is standing out there in the pouring rain, the lightning storm, just soaked from head to toe, and she walks up, and she has an umbrella, and she says, she comes over, and she puts the umbrella over him, as if to, like, protect him from this just outpouring of... It's so poetic. It's so great.
The other great one is when he proposes to her, and they hug, and immediately a bunch of bats come out from the cave.
Yep. He thought...
Yeah, it's...
He thought that was it.
So the symbolism that they do there, and a lot of that is heavily reliant on the animation to hold up to that. And as great as the voice acting, as great as the music is to an extent, it's really reliant. You need that A+ animation, and those scenes especially do not let you down.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, we're gonna take a quick 2-minute break and come back and wrap things up with our music segment and our final scorecard. All right, welcome back. We do have an extended episode today because we're covering Batman Mask of the Phantasm. We are going to wrap things up here with music in just a second. Just as a review, we have our plot. I gave it 8 out of 10. Liam gave it 7 out of 10. Voice acting, we both gave it 9 out of 10. And our animation, we both gave it 8 out of 10. So we're coming in the home stretch here with music. And Liam, I'm not going to lie, going into it, I was kind of... anticipating or hoping for sort of a large presence for music in the movie, and it starts off pretty strong with a scene that you mentioned. The animation doesn't hold up very well, but you have the introduction of the Batman theme, and it's done in a choir with a choir as the backup singing the Batman theme, which is super cool. But as I was taking notes throughout our time viewing it, I only noticed really 6 points or so in the 76 minutes of the whole movie of where music seemed to make an impact. That doesn't speak... Again, we talked highly of the plot. The plot moved the film. Plot didn't necessarily need the music to advance it. But I felt like... I don't know, they kind of missed some opportunities to use that music to really enhance certain scenes. Specifically... you have the scene of the graveyard that introduces the Phantasm, where she comes and kills the mobster, and the theme and the music in that scene is very spooky. It's very subtle, and that seems to be the theme for the Phantasm throughout the movie. And I think it's okay initially because you're kind of introducing this character, but I really wish they would have done something to create a theme song that kind of resonates, like they did with the Joker, like they did with Catwoman, like what they even did with Two-Face. That you have a theme that kind of sticks with them, because to me, in my mind, when I'm thinking about the theme song from the Phantasm, it's just somebody going, ooh, like that, like just like straight through for an hour. So I think that the choir works. It enhanced the Batman theme and made it more. And I can picture seeing. I regret that we didn't get the opportunity to see this in the theaters when it came out. That would have been cool. But I can imagine sitting in a movie theater, hearing that come across, and getting goosebumps just because it's very impactful. I think that the scene with the police chase with Batman, there's some good music points in that. The scene of the final scene of the movie, where she escapes, she takes the Joker, she disappears, and Batman has to run away. The choir's kind of brought back in, and there's some meshing of, I guess, what is the Phantasm theme with the Batman theme, and that works out pretty well. And then the end scene, where Batman's standing on a roof, it kind of mirrors one of the Keaton films and how that ended with the bat signal off in the distance, and he sort of jumps off and uses his grappling hook and swings away. I thought that punctuated it very well, but then the credits hit, and it's this weird 90s saxophone jazz song that doesn't really fit with anything. It's very, very bizarre. Thought I was watching the ending of a different movie, actually. So overall, because of that, good music in spots, but missed out in some spots. I gave it 7 out of 10. How about you?
Yeah, I went 6 out of 10. You pretty much covered the big moments there. The beginning and ending sequences are very much enhanced by the music, and there's a few little moments when the Joker's introduced and he's taking Sal, the mobster played by Abe Vigoda, if we didn't mention that. Through this sort of decrepit version of the World's Fair now, the sort of the classic Joker theme plays on the xylophone, and there's a few little touches that are nice, but yeah, the music really does fade into the background. This movie is very much reliant on the animation and the voice acting for a lot of those big dramatic moments. Again, not that the music is terrible or anything.
No.
That's saying 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. That's not to say it's just a little bit. It's not as an important part. It's a little bit in the background here, as we mentioned, I think, on a few other shows.
Yeah.
So it's pretty solid, but it's not the blow away start to finish that something like The Last Laugh or Forgotten was.
Yep.
So but it's still a solid 6 out of 10. Definitely better than average. Those parts that really bring it up, the highs are very high.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would tend to agree with you. All right, so let's talk about bonus points. I didn't have any bonus points I wanted to assign, but just overall, this movie is great. I think for a very long time it was actually the highest rated. It may still be the highest rated Batman movie on Rotten Tomatoes. It's great. It holds up, with the exception of the computer animation. I think we said at the beginning, the digital animation of Gotham City is a little. It's kind of like watching Reboot today. You're like, at the time it was like, wow, this is amazing, and then you're like, ugh.
Yeah, the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s did a lot of that. They'd have the digital or the CGI buildings that Spider-Man would swing through. It just doesn't look very good, and to me it's like the strength of Batman the Animated Series, especially the original episodes, is this incredible hand-drawn animation. And so just seeing any CGI that's that blatant CGI is
pretty jarring.
Yeah, exactly.
I would agree with you. But I think overall, like I said, the amount of Max Fleischer hat tips in this are great. You got any extra bonus points?
I do have one, plus one. I mentioned him a little bit when we were talking about plot. Alan Burnett, just giving a bonus point for him.
There you go.
Like I said, I think he's a little bit of an unsung hero when it comes to the DCAU. He doesn't have the exact importance that somebody like Bruce Timm or Eric Radomski or Paul Dini has, but he is a huge piece. He's a huge cog in that machine that
Absolutely.
that helped all of these shows. As we mentioned, he worked on Batman Beyond, he worked on Superman, he worked on Justice League, he worked on going forward, he works on the Justice League action show that's around now. He worked on The Batman, and I'm sure many other projects. So he's, as far as just animation in general, but especially the DCAU, I really think he deserves a little extra shout out. So he'll be my bonus point for this week, is one for Alan Burnett.
Very good. All right, so based on our scores here, what was your final score?
So my final score was 31 out of 40.
Okay, very good. That includes your bonus point. Mine was 32 out of 40, so we're pretty close there. We haven't had too much disparity. We were talking between our two, or most of our episodes thus far. There hasn't been one that somebody loved or somebody hated very much, but it usually turns out somebody usually likes it a little bit more than the other one did.
Yeah.
So we're right around the same spot, though, on this episode. What about you, the listeners? If you what do you think about Batman Mask of the Phantasm? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Were there plot holes that we missed? Were there characters that you loved that we didn't? Let us know. Tweet at us at DCAU Review on Twitter. You can tweet us on there. Lots of interaction going on there. Please check us out. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/DCAU Review. We always post our latest episodes there, and it's a great way to interact with us as well. And then don't forget, of course, also to follow us or subscribe to us on iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us out as a podcast immensely. So please, we'd love to get that feedback from you. All right, you got anything else?
I think we can wrap it up. Like you said, I really do encourage anybody. Love tweeting with people. We've been tweeting a little bit back and forth over the last few weeks. Love getting any kind of feedback.
Yeah.
You have memories of watching this when you were younger. if there are other podcasts, other YouTube channels out there that have already reviewed this, maybe we disagree with them.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to talk about it though. So love getting a chance to talk with people and just explore this, because that's what it is. We're a couple of nerds who want to discuss the stuff that we love.
Absolutely.
And even if you disagree with us, we're happy to hear it and happy to discuss it with you. So
Absolutely.
Love getting to hear that.
Absolutely. All right. So thank you so much for listening to this supersized episode. Until next time, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
We'll catch you later.
Bye bye.